So, what advice would you give to someone who says they're in a relationship, they're happy, things are good, they're feeling in love, they're in that like infatuation phase where everything's just like light and bright and happy, and they really want the relationship to progress into something more serious, but their partner doesn't see a future, they are hesitant to commit, they aren't sure if the other person is the right fit, and they want to still keep having fun and maintaining this like casual connection, and they're feeling like they don't want to stay in the relationship long term.
There's lots of layers to that, and it depends on everybody's different perceptions within that experience. I mean, we're all different, but there is a universal desire to feel love, to be in love with another, to feel that sense of safety and that sense of connection. And that comes from a level of transparency and consistency, that if there is that and that willingness to show up with each other and actually just be in the uncomfortableness and have those transparent talks, even if that person who is feeling a little flighty is feeling that cold feet, but is still willing to entertain what could be, even though they're transparent about where they are, that says a lot. And that's really big. And so, you can't convince someone to love you.
Right.
That's not necessarily healthy. But you can discern with your intuition, when is the moment to walk away, and how long is too long, or how long or how often to actually communicate about where you guys are at. And there is a dance to that. We speak about that. And that is unique to each person. But there are definitely some red flags and some green flags when it comes down to these things that can really help anyone who's listening and maybe like support the efficiency of how this can go and not waste time.
Yeah.
For both partners, honestly.
I think that's such a big thing with people, especially between ages like 20 to 40, is everyone's thinking about like, the timeline of life, and if they want to have a family, and like, you got to be married by this time, you got to have all these timeline markers and milestones that we're all kind of like in this race to accomplish. And I mean, I think it's so important to value our own time while also being open to the possibility of somebody coming around and changing their mind around their values. I think the real topic here is a question of values. Is like, if you value your time and you value the idea of having a family, then you really got to assess, like, it's different for everyone, but using your own intuition, you can assess whether it's like a 3-month container or a 6-month container. Like, when do you draw the line?
Yeah. What is your boundary? What is your line
how
in the
much
sand?
time are you willing to devote to the relationship with your partner saying they're not sure if they're going to stay with you before you actually just say, okay, I'm moving on. And like I said, it really is a matter of intuition and a matter of like what your values are, what your partner's values are, how many things you can agree on, and how transparent they're actually being with you on a day-to-day basis. Because some days they might feel like they're 100% all in, and other days they might feel like they're stringing you along.
The hot cold effect can be there.
And that can be really painful, and it can be something that it might feel like a waste of time in the long run if you're not dealing with it in a way that makes your life better, where you learn lessons from the situation, from your perspective, you're actually gaining clarity. Even if you don't stay with that person long term, how does that relationship make you a better person?
And I mean, hey, we can find gold in anything. I remember in past relationships, when I was going through it and when it was not going very well, it was like, what gold? This is horrible. There's nothing but coal. But upon later reflection, it's like, whoa, I wouldn't be the person I am today with the boundaries that I have, with the discernment that I have, with the trusting of my intuition now that I have, if I didn't, And so I think it's really about honoring what truth is coming from the other person, no matter how uncomfortable it is to hear it or it is to speak it, that courage to do that's sexy as it is, actually. That invokes a sense of spark and connection just through that sheer willingness. And that alone could actually sustain growth and connection over time. And those like little micro wins, like if you notice those things, like, oh, wow, like, it may not be like exponential, it may not be massive, but it is for that person, maybe not for you, but for that person to make those little micro adjustments for the sake of themselves and you and the relationship in the container, you're moving forward. So as long as you feel like, hey, you're moving forward, that's a huge blessing. But it's definitely a red flag if you feel like you're not moving anywhere, it feels like static, or if you feel like your intuition as well is being denied.
Yeah, if you're suppressing your intuition or you're settling in the relationship, you're allowing your own innate intelligence to be tossed away or thrown under the rug just so that you can settle for the relationship that you think you want. And you're not actually allowing yourself
what you think you want.
Yeah.
That's interesting. How there's like a perception in your mind, and sometimes we try to fit people in the box to try to like make it work, or we like gaslight ourselves, manipulate ourselves, and being blind to not see the truth which is in front of us. Or the partner who's feeling a bit unwavered is saying something to try to make it feel justified, but deep in your heart, in your soul, even like deep down, like that's not right. And the body keeps the score. It knows. It's a felt visceral experience. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you have that. And it's really important to support that. And if I feel personally that if you do not support your partner in their intuition and in honoring that you got to look at yourself a little closer. Because it's coming up for a reason. And it's there actually to support both of you in seeing a blind spot, a shadow, something that needs to be looked at. And if you can dare to look at it together, you got hope, you got potential. But there still is a line, like, what is it, like, what could it be? I mean, it could be 3 months, 6 months. That depends on what it means for you as a person being with somebody who isn't ready to commit. What does that look like for you? That's super unique to each person. But just feel into that as you go, but just know that your intuition doesn't lie. The patterns and cycles of things, the transparency into action and consistency in that shows you everything for yourself, for them. And you'll be able to see the long game from how the short game presents itself within a certain amount of time. And try your best to honor yourself with that commitment to, if by this time there is not, okay, all right, okay, I can see where this is going, or okay, this feels good or not, then honor yourself enough to walk away if need be.
Yeah, it's really about self-worth.
Yeah.
At least for me in my life, like that's been such a huge theme of going into relationships and not necessarily settling, but knowing that I deserved better deep down and choosing something that I knew wasn't meant for me. Because maybe subconsciously I felt like I couldn't do better, or the situation was just too convenient. And we are creatures of habit. So once we're in a relationship where we feel comfortable and things are just working, like it's you get into this mindset, or at least I have in the past, where it's like, why fix it if it ain't broke? Like it's just keep going along, like in a maybe a direction that isn't ideal. But for the moment it feels okay. So you're like, oh, this is fine. Things are gonna get better. And ultimately I had to look at myself and I had to ask, what do I really deserve? What is possible for me that I may not see in the moment, but I can feel in my body? Like you said, it's a visceral felt experience when you feel like something's off in a relationship with someone who is maybe not doing their best. You can feel it. And you can feel when you're not doing your best either. The 4 agreements, now there's 5 agreements, but those are values that we live by and that we practice every single day as much as we possibly can, in every interaction that we have. And I think doing your best is something that only you know, but other people can feel.
Yeah.
So when you're in a partnership, when someone is stringing you along and they're acting like they love you and they're not actually showing it with their actions.
Love is action.
Actions speak louder than words. And at the end of the day, you really got to look at those little micro actions and see which of the patterns are going to continue and which are the things that are incrementally getting better.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most important things in a relationship is actually celebrating the small wins. Because if you're in a partnership that isn't feeling great, but you believe that it has the potential to improve, the best thing that you can do is actually acknowledge and celebrate those small baby steps, those little pieces that are incrementally improving, because the effort is sometimes the hardest part. Because when we're putting effort towards something is when we're breaking a pattern, when we're changing a habit. And the first time you do that is actually the hardest part. And once you get into the habit of changing those patterns, it gets easier. But if you do something that maybe your partner has requested that you do, and you do that thing and you're expecting them to acknowledge it and they don't, it's really hard to go back and do it again. So if you're
that's a good point.
And I've been on both sides of that, and so I've realized it's so important to really be acknowledged and to acknowledge others and to praise those moments where you see change, so that the change can continue on this positive momentum.
Yes. And you know, it's so easy when you're feeling ungrounded and uncomfortable and insecure. Insecurity comes up with those feelings of what are we? That it's really easy to go into a bit of a downward spiral in your mind, because you're like wanting that sense of like, okay, you know, how are we good? And that can come from childhood and parenting and all that stuff. You know, it's all correlated for sure, our sense of safety. But generating your own sense of safety with yourself, knowing that you're good, like that takes time, takes effort. We're all different with that. But what really helps is not nitpicking and trying to find ways to try to justify, okay, that's why we're not working out.
Right.
Look at, see you're doing that. See, and like nitpicking it.
Yeah.
It's easy to do that.
It's so much easier to see the negative.
Oh, it's so easy when you're already kind of like unstable. But you know, it's so important that in those transparent conversations, hopefully there's like a weekly sort of drop in, even like a daily minor drop in of like, how you doing, how you feeling, being with each other, and actively praising, you know, and really being in that. It's you can still talk about the things that are uncomfortable that you've noticed and things like that, but I feel personally from our experience what's worked really well is really sandwiching it with just starting with like, hey, like I've really been noticing those small incremental aspects that you've been doing to improve and support. Like I see that. I love that you've been doing that. I know that must be hard for you. You know, putting yourself in your partner's shoes for a minute, because even though you're so in your head about what's going on, it's so valuable to go into the shoes, into the depths of what it might be like, unscripted by the way, might be like for your partner for those experiences, because it's really uncomfortable. And like, of course, it's two to tango. You're also finding ways to adjust and to improve. But, you know, hey, like, what are we willing also like to be with somebody? Because we're all human and we're all not perfect. We're humanly human. Being like, okay, well, I could be with this person forever and accept the fact that they're not perfect and there's going to be these little things. But also, what am I not willing? So getting clear on what am I really, in a long-term relationship, what are my absolute like non-negotiables? Whoa, how big that is with so many people just like run into it and they don't state these things right off the bat. And they don't have those like clear agreements. It can get really messy and wobbly and even more unstable, which the whole thing just starts to implode. And it's dangerous.
Well, that makes me think of business partnerships too. I think one of the biggest reasons that businesses fail is because, business partnerships is because the people came into business together without clear agreements. And absolutely. So then there's expectations that happen. And you can apply that same principle to every type of relationship because it's all about, and this is why I brought up the 4 agreements, because it is all about the agreements that we set.
Great book.
Yeah,
check it out.
It's so life-changing when you actually start to implement these things because you realize that all we are is just a series of patterns and beliefs and habits and agreements that we have made with ourselves. And when we enter into partnership with others, there's a third entity. There's the entity that is you, and that's the group of values and systems, and then there's the entity that's the other person. When you come together, you create a whole new entity, just like the business, right? And so then if this business or this relationship is not in congruence with both parties, the values and the non-negotiables, then inevitably there will be conflict. And I'm not saying that you have to throw the relationship out if there's conflict. Conflict is great. We love conflict. Because you learn through conflict.
Helpful. You see so much there.
There's so much growth in conflict. In fact, we embrace conflict.
Actually, having that perspective to be willing to see that as like a great way to learn and grow, that alone, to get that alone, accepting that together has moved our relationship a million miles ahead. Instead of being like, oh no, we have to have a conversation that's not good. Like this energy, but it's like everything's a chance to grow deeper together and grow stronger. You know?
I mean, within reason, of course, that's where boundaries come in. That's why, honestly, one of the best things to do is just to write a list. What are the non-negotiables? What are the things that you're not willing to tolerate? This is a window of tolerance. We all have a window of tolerance. Some windows are really big and some windows are really small. So right away, when you begin a partnership with someone, become familiar with their window of tolerance. And know what their boundaries are when it comes to conflict, and when pushing too much is actually not helping, and when they actually need a little bit of a push, and they need, and this goes both ways, when you need to be reminded, when you need to be, especially the feminine, like the feminine really needs that frame, that structure, because the feminine is always going to push against boundaries. And so it's really important to have those boundaries set in place for both parties before you actually commit to a long-term thing. Because the problems are only going to become more complicated the longer you're in partnership, because you have more history and you have more
buildup.
More baggage.
Compounding.
So if you can get clear on those agreements right off the bat, then it's going to be a lot easier when you have bigger problems in the future, because you can just always go back to, okay, these are the things that I will tolerate. This is my emotional bandwidth, and this is where I can meet you in a genuine, honest place. This is where I'm willing to meet you. And if the other person isn't willing to meet you where you require them to meet you, then that's where you can actually assess, okay, well, this is how much time I'm willing to give to the relationship to see if we can actually make this be lucrative and sustainable, whether it's financially or otherwise. You really need to, need to assess where you're at with it. And once you do that, then it can feel really good, because then when you go into conflict, it actually is kind of exciting. You're like, oh, there's something here.
That takes practice. To get to that point, but
and I talk about this too in yoga. Like when you come up to a pose or something that feels really like difficult and challenging, it's exciting at that point, because you're like, oh, here's an edge. I'm meeting myself at an edge.
Like working out, you're like, ooh, that's an edge, but if I keep going, but I know my threshold, it's going to be so good for me. Like I'm really meeting myself there. It's good.
And that's where you get to assess how far you're willing to go with yourself and how far you're willing to go with the other person.
That's a mindset shift too, you know? I think it'd be really powerful to end this with some like really potent red flags and green flags of this scenario. And the scenario is that you are both together, but you haven't labeled it a relationship quite yet, because one of you is really like interested in being in a relationship, but the other is still like wavering a bit because they still have more to develop within themselves until they feel officially ready. Or perhaps it's there's something that they're seeing in the other person and they're wishing to see how it's going to develop. Totally fair. It's important to have time and spaciousness to be able to understand what's going on and not just run into it. But perhaps let's start with you with some green flags of what is some positives in that dynamic that could really support the growth and evolution of that.
Yeah, and one of the biggest examples for me is being willing to bring up the things that don't feel good and be honest about what needs to change.
Yeah.
Like for me, I find confrontation quite easy. I know that it's not easy for a lot of people. Yeah. I'm a very opinionated, willing to argue person. Like I actually enjoy having a good, solid debate.
Ella's a badass, so yeah, you're just willing.
So I will never shy away from an opportunity
Respect
to
that.
debate something because I know that I always walk away with gems.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's a red flag, that's a green flag when somebody is willing to actually go into a debate, a healthy debate, where both people are being heard, both people are being received and respected in their opinion, and there's that level of trust and safety.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say consistently dedicating to show up in the uncomfortable conversation and sticking to a timeline of once a week. For instance, consistency is so hot and so awesome to be able to be I'm willing to show up in the fire and on a weekly basis until we get 100% feeling good and clear. We can meet each other there. And honestly, and this goes into the red flags, but if you do have that consistency and even then at the end of the conversation, you still feel that unsettled, that sense of intuition that's telling you that it's still not feeling really good, then it wasn't ended with some love and grace. And there's something there to look at further. But I think just the sheer sense of willingness to be able to be consistent together in that conversation is a major green flag.
Yeah, and another one I just thought of is the ability to be humble. I think that's
willing to be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. The ability to be proven wrong.
That was a big one for me, honestly.
That's been such a huge one for me. I feel like I've been so humbled over the last few years on so many things that I thought that I felt really strongly about. And I've realized the value in actually being able to say, that was me then, and that's what I believed then, and this is me now, and this is what I believe now. And not to be so attached to these ideals or these ultimately restrictions, because every time that you believe something, it means you don't believe in something else. So that's why beliefs are so powerful, because you can't say you believe in two things at the same time if they contradict each other. So the ability to put your ego aside and just to say, hey, I feel really strongly about this in this moment, and I'm willing to see how I could be proven wrong, and I'm willing to have my mind changed. The ability to be malleable in your thought process.
Teachable. Open.
That's also really sexy, because for somebody to say, oh yeah, I wrote a whole book on this topic, and I I was so intensely believing in this, and now I've turned around and
That's
completely
huge.
changed my mind. We both did this with veganism.
Truth.
That's been such a journey for us to be able to say, okay, we were vegan for 10 years, and we were very strongly opinionated about that.
Very, very. In fact, we got to a very judgmental space with it. But
there was so much.
And this is just our personal experience. We know that everybody's body is different. And also a disclaimer, we are speaking from a heterosexual couple perspective, and we understand also that there is overlap in same-sex relationships and others who choose other choices. So yeah, it really is really universal aspects to a lot of what we're speaking of, but we are speaking from our experience in our container for what we can offer in that sense. And for instance, even our dietary aspects, just being open to change is cool. I think it's a positive trait to have, is to be malleable and not to be super rigid about anything. And that's also comes into that green flag piece of I feel currently that I need time to be able to understand if this is really something I want to be in long term, but I'm open to having more deeper conversations, more sense of intimacy, and intimacy is beyond just sex. It's beautiful opportunities of connection. Into me, I see. And being able to meet each other in the step-by-step of that and say, okay, like within a certain amount of time, whatever that means for you, let's see where we're at. And yeah, that might differ between different people. But yeah, that's a really sexy, awesome thing to be open like that. Versus leaving somebody, and goes into the red flags, leaving somebody on this like, well, I don't know if I want to be in a relationship, but like I'm having fun and this is cool. And it's like so unsettling.
Yeah, that only really works if both people are in that mode or in that phase of life where they're just like, I just want to play, I just want to be
which is
free.
cool.
Like,
But if one of you is like, I know what I want, and the other is like, it could really be rough.
Yeah, at some point you really need to honor your own integrity and your own center of value systems. Like where do you place yourself in the grand scope of your life and your goals, and how does that person support your greater vision? Like if you can imagine the greatest, grandest vision for your life, and if you can think of yourself as like this artistic masterpiece, like how do you see yourself in 10 years? If that person doesn't support that version of you, then it's probably safe to say that they're not going to be by your side when you become that version of you. So it's really you really have to assess, like, for yourself, are you willing to perhaps sacrifice those years or those months to be with that person, or are you going to just choose to make them understand your point of view with as much love and compassion, or express your values and what's important, so that they can understand that if they do really love you, they will let you go, so that you can become who you're meant to become.
And do you love yourself enough to be willing to walk away if you're not receiving the love that you deserve?
Exactly, and that's sometimes the hardest part, to say, do I love myself enough to let this ideal or this perspective or this belief go and release attachment for what is possible, that I know is possible, that I might not see yet, but I believe is worth the risk.
And are these, like, is this potential partner in this circumstance a team player? Is this someone who's actually got my back, who's on my team, and I'm on their team? And even though, like, it may, like, day to day, it may feel like you lost the game and maybe you won the game and maybe, things are, but like you're on the same team and you're not facing off with each other. You're on that team, I'm on this team, but you're actually together playing on the same field of love and expression, and you're tossing the ball around to, like, see what's up and feel and entertain. Like, that's a huge trait. I feel like you've got to be team players. You have to be each other's allies. And the moment that you project doubt and all these things onto the other person is the moment that you stop being a team player and you distance yourself and you take yourself off the field and you leave them alone in the game. And that can feel so isolating. And, like, I'm sure we all have experiences of what that feels like on both sides. But, we have to be willing to really stand up for ourselves of what we deserve. It's just such a crucial thing, and really acknowledging that piece. And I honestly feel that my personal experience as a man, loving and appreciating women and being with you especially, is the fact that I can state something to you that may feel uncomfortable about something that you need to work on, or something that I've just acknowledged that I need to work on that's going to take a minute and going to take a little bit of patience from you, that you're not going to just get mad, or you're not going to, like, freak out at me for bringing it up. Like, you're going to meet it with grace because it takes courage to even bring up uncomfortability. And, like, that alone makes me feel safer with you, honest with you. And it also just straight up makes me more willing to be like, what else do I appreciate about her? Because I appreciate that piece, but I also love the way that she moves in the moment. And I love the way that she's showing up in her life, in her career. And I love the way that she's being courageous outside of just, like, us being together, but just in the world. And actually actively, consistently speaking that out loud when I desire is really important, because I feel that personally women are more like flowers than they are men. And women, just like a beautiful flower needs watering, and watering, men do too, we all do, but, like, especially women, that sense of praise, of acknowledgement of how you yourself as a partner are feeling about the other female partner. Like, I love the way that your hair looks, like you look so beautiful. And then also acknowledge things that also could be uncomfortable, but you can say it all and you can do it all. But I think it's really important that if you're going to be nitpicking more than you're praising, it's going to fall apart. You're just going to burn it to the ground, in my personal opinion.
And going back to the topic of consistency,
Yeah.
I think that those moments need to happen regularly because
They do.
if you have
Daily.
yeah
Okay.
if you have
Prescription.
so many
Daily
little
praising.
pieces of criticism that you hold back from speaking, you might think, oh, I'm being nice because I'm gonna like hold them back in this moment, but what ends up happening is they bottle up, they build up, and then eventually they explode on someone, and it's inevitable. So
Yeah.
it's really important to have those daily check-ins.
Yeah.
And
Whatever that looks like for you. It could be
Yeah.
very minor, just like holding someone in and being like,
Yeah.
hey, like what's like, or all the way to
Yeah.
bigger. It depends on
Yeah.
what's needed. But
nipping things in the butt, like right when they are feeling real and alive and present, because that's when it's easier to resolve things.
exactly. Well, thank you all for this beautiful conversation. Lately, our discussions seem to be going over the 50-minute mark, and that's totally okay because what we're saying is potent and real, and really grateful for you guys being here and just really sitting with it. Take what resonates, leave the rest. Please comment in the comment section just about what is coming alive for you, what is being stirred up in you, what resonated with you, and stories and examples. And honestly, like this is just a universal human experience where we're all just trying to figure it out. We're all fumbling, we're all falling down, we're all getting back up. Oh, okay. And Ella and I are just speaking from places where it's worked for us and what we've acknowledged over the lots of faltering over past relationships to finally get to this place where we're really solid and ever expanding and growing and deepening our love. And that's why we feel open enough to speak vulnerably to you guys, is from that sense of deep respect and stability that we've grown over the years. And we'd love to hear your perspective. So please subscribe, please like, please comment, share this with others who you feel would resonate. And I mean, all of us would in some way. So thank you so much for showing up to listen, to feel, and enjoy more of our relational artistry expression and comedic gold. The relationship hotline has been great and lots of fun to bring up these really intense conversations and loosen it up a little bit and laugh at ourselves. So we love you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.